Welcome to the Fictitious Dark. We're your little chico.
Oh, welcome to the dock.
Hey, I'm Doc.
I'm in the dock here.
I'm Fictitious
Welcome to the
here.
darkness.
Welcome to the Fictitious Dark podcast, where we explore the line between truth and the fictitious. I am Brandon Hartsock, and these are my co-hosts Josiah Miller
What up?
and Rick Castro.
Yo.
Today we are going to dive into Poltergeist and just kind of anything and everything to do with them, our thoughts on them and all that. So let's just dive right into it. Did either of you have a subject that you've researched with it that you want to get into?
Pretty much read into the Enfield, what they call the Enfield Poltergeist, because I was interested from the movie The Conjuring 2. So, pretty much it was in August 1977. Peggy Hodgson called Metropolitan Police saying that she witnessed her, furniture moving around her children and knocking sounds on the walls. The children were 11 and 13 years old, the ones that were in the area of the poltergeist. And when the police constable got there, he noticed that the chair was wobbling. And later claims that happened later were disembodied voices, loud noises, thrown toys, overturned chairs, and the children were levitating, which, is pretty much the book when it comes to poltergeists.
Yeah. Children levitating, though, that's pretty out there.
Yeah. That's when it started taking to the next level. But it seemed like when I read about it, it happened over almost like a 2-year period. I think it's around like a year and a half to 2 years. And they had multiple paranormal investigators, which we see in The Conjuring 2. We had 2 famous ones. I believe that their name was the Warrens. I can't remember.
Yeah. The Elizabeth Warren, or am I
Ed and Lorraine?
Ed and Lorraine?
Ed and Lorraine.
Yeah. Oh, I kind of combined those 2 names there. Yeah, Ed and Lorraine. Yeah.
So,
And
the investigators noticed as they were there, really heavy furniture moving on its own accord and objects being thrown against the wall. Pretty much the same thing that what the police had seen beforehand. But as it went on further, a couple of the investigators would notice that whenever they would add influence to what would happen, say, was there any pyromania? Pyromania would automatically start happening. If there was I can't remember what else it was, but if another thing happened, they would ask, and it exactly would happen a little bit later. A ventriloquist, if I can say that correctly, later also said that he noticed that the disembodied voices were tricks from one of the child, and she was able to project her voice and notice that the way that the spirit was speaking and changing subjects was in the matter of the child was doing when he had talked to her. So he concluded that children were playing tricks on the family.
Okay, yeah, I never heard those details about it. I remember, from the movie, mainly what I remember was, when they catch the kid, throwing and breaking plates and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't think they put any of that kind of stuff in the movie. So, yeah,
No,
that's new to me.
I think when they started adding in the demon, what was the demon's name again? Valak?
Yeah.
yeah, valid.
That's 100% fake, right?
Yeah, that's a James Wan creation. And so what I was noticing with other research is that a lot of the older stories from Victorian times in London and Scotland, they're usually debunked by people saying that there's underground water systems that were making weird noises, and also wind coming through the chimney, knocking things down, strong gusts of wind, or other tricksters and illusionists playing jokes on families or getting back at them.
So, was there anything about this particular case that was even like real, or was it kind of all faked? What was the conclusion that they had?
They never found any real what's it called?
Evidence?
Poltergeist evidence.
Yeah.
Then they all, like a bunch of journalists, speculated it was just sensationalism, so that way they could get attention. And like I said, the ventriloquist said that it was a bunch of vocal tricks and things that the children were, or at least one of the child was staging.
I believe that one of them, I think Janet, she had like apparently false vocal cords, so you can develop like an additional set of vocal cords in your larynx, and you get like a wider range of a vocal ability. So this little girl had the ability to go like really deep and bass, and it allowed her to kind of fake the demon voice because she could throw her voice too.
So the real headline should be "Mutant Girl Terrorizes Family."
Yeah. Yeah.
That creation of the next Marvel series.
Yeah, for real. She's a little X-Men. That's what's going on there. I never heard about that.
Not only that, but Janet apparently was like very athletic. Like she did like a lot of school activities. So like the photo of her levitating, because they had like a camera that was, I believe would react to movement. So she basically like jumped off her bed in a certain way. And so they concluded like, well, that's the levitating right there. Is she could just, if you're athletic enough, you could just like jump and then like turn yourself so you appear in midair, So yeah, basically Janet was a mutant in the Enfield case. And an interesting thing to me was that a lot of the research I did was in stuff like the Stockwell ghost and the Enfield case, and then Tina Resch, who the Columbus poltergeist case. I'm finding like a lot of material when I did research is usually children, but the interesting thing is a lot of the time it seems to be like young girls or women doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Usually for attention or I feel like a poltergeist would be a way for a child they can stage or do certain things and then not take responsibility, but they get to be mischievous. So it could be a way of acting out. So I do see a lot of these cases where a lot of the evidence seems to point to not being a spirit, but being children or little girls. Is that a lot of it involves this, where they'll know how to like do specific things or mess with people as like a subtle form of rebellion or mischief, and that's something I found very fascinating. Unfortunately, a lot of my research was not yielding a lot of solid. Here's like some evidence that has no either circumstantial or real evidence to counter. Like even in the Enfield case, I think the girls were like being interviewed, and one of them like basically said like it wasn't real, and the other one's like shut up. And it's like, well, I mean,
yeah,
it's like stuff like that.
That is kind of funny because the whole thing of poltergeist is the connections of emotions and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it's like prime suspects for that are teenagers, usually female teenagers, and then it's like the prime suspects for people that are lying are teenagers. So it's like you got two different things. So that's actually kind of funny, but also sad at the same time. As far as the definition of poltergeist, I suppose we should cover that a little bit just in case for some reason there's somebody that doesn't know. So the definition of poltergeist is A poltergeist is like a buildup of emotional energy. Well, this is like the actual definition, whereas the German definition of the word is something not necessarily that, but it is a noisy ghost. That is the
Yeah.
technical German origin of that word. And then it developed into what we know it as today, which is more so a buildup of emotional energy that can cause things to be thrown around, noises to be heard, voices to be heard, very rarely an actual apparition of either the person that is causing the poltergeist or just of shadows and things like that. But usually the poltergeist is more so just an emotional echo of what this person or situation is going through. And it just usually takes on a form of its own because of high volatile emotions that are just so strong that they actually have an impact and kind of almost live on their own outside of the person or situation that it was developed in. That's where you get the situation of like I think this is more so where your classic like someone died here and had a grisly murder and blah blah blah. It is a in a way it's like that environment has now been stained with that extreme emotion that happened that is like usually so extreme simply because of how evil it was or just how the intensity of the emotion that the person was feeling or continues to feel and stuff like that.
There's a lot of Japanese spirits like that. I feel like the Grudge is kind of built around that concept of a very highly charged emotion creates the psychic energy that allows something to exist. You know.
Yeah, and when it comes down to like this kind of stuff, I we're I mean, I don't want to necessarily speak for every single one of us, but we're not necessarily saying like this is 100% real. Like, oh my god, every aspect of this is real. We're speculating. There are aspects of this that I do believe in, as far as especially poltergeist. I think poltergeists kind of come down to being more real than a lot of things when it comes to paranormal stuff.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I would argue that in some ways, even contrary to what some people might believe, I think poltergeists are easier to fake than say a Bigfoot or
Yeah.
some other things because you don't have to have something visible, right? Like, so if you
Mm-hmm.
rig something or make an illusion or a camera trick or some pulley, like we still use wires to trick people in theater and film and stuff. So and magician accents. So I feel like in some ways it wouldn't seem like it, but poltergeists are kind of easier because the evidence is, well, something flew across the room, the camera caught it. You don't have to have something on camera throwing something across the room.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fairy doesn't have to be visible. It's
Yeah.
um, and it's again like you were saying, we're speculating, but to me, I think something cool about the fictitious dark is that we can believe or be open to the idea of the supernatural. But I also like bringing in, similar to what we did in the last episode, the idea that the psychological aspect is almost like a realistic version of what the spirit or supernatural thing is. So, for instance, like we were saying, if children have all this pent up energy to do something negative, and then they don't want to get caught, they don't want the consequences, so they would do something. I also found in my research is that there was some speculation that perhaps due to psychological disturbances, perhaps this emotion builds up, and when people dissociate, so they literally have like a kind of a mental break of some sort, they dissociate because there's people who will like lose time. So it's possible that if there was pent up emotion, that they would want to do something negative but dissociate from it. And to their perspective, it would seem as though I have no idea what did this. I was the only one home, so it couldn't have been anyone else, because say their parent is gone or their spouse or what have you. So in a sense, from like a psychological point of view, the poltergeist is completely real from the perspective of the person because they have dissociated it, and so they do not recall it. I also think that's also a possible explanation for some of these cases. Or another thing I'm sure that we might have something to say is that a big thing about poltergeist that I also found is that a lot of people focus on animal responses. Like I've heard a lot of stories about, especially from like my partners in the past. They've said like, yeah, my in certain places I've lived, my dog or my cat will focus on spots in the wall. And I had two theories regarding. I'd be curious to see what you guys think. Is that maybe the animal responses are they can hear some sort of animal or bug or something um, in the wall or on the side of the wall in that particular corner, or maybe there's some seismic thing happening in that direction, and they hear it, but it's too far away for them to like be threatened by it. Um, but I was curious if you guys had any thoughts on some of that stuff.
That's yeah. You can go, Rick.
Well, I was gonna say is like animals can definitely hear at like different frequencies than we can. So especially if there's like something outside that's hitting a pitch that we can't hear or a frequency that we can't hear, they're definitely going to pick it up where we'll be completely oblivious to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in some cultures they believe that animals can see spirits as well
Yeah.
and hear them, and one of the reasons they bark is to like try to like warn us about when there's like a negative presence around.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're going by my personal experiences, I always have negative presences around with my dogs barking off and on. So, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just like it's a thing that, when I was reading it, it's almost based on your own like psychological makeup on how you honestly believe that poltergeists, come along. And adding to the dog thing, I think, it just is one of those things where if you have like that thought and you're open to the interpretation of a ghost, or well, I shouldn't say ghost because poltergeist and ghosts are two different things in a sense, where you're going to be more susceptible of believing that it's around.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you guys feel about, it's almost like a wishful thinking type of deal, if you put, that thought into it, sometimes it's going to happen. Or if you, like you said, some cultures on the last episode, when you don't want to utter like a certain word,
Mm-hmm.
the S word that we used last episode, it's one of those things like you kind of invite into the, um, you know, area around you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys believe any of that or how you guys feel about it. I would love to hear your your ideas about it.
Well, yeah. So I had a little bit of personal experience with the whole animal thing. I know that like specifically a lot of cultures have these beliefs with animals, but then cats a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's why there's the whole like association of cats and like witchcraft, cats and the devil, and all that.
The
kind of
Egyptians,
stuff.
way back to the Egyptians, they believed they were
Yeah.
guarding the underworld.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, no. So back when I was like a kid in my childhood, I always had cats and stuff. And I recall moments where all of a sudden the cat would like big-eyed, big pupils, looking at like this corner of the ceiling, and then just like freaking out and like running away from it, and
Mm-hmm.
like looking at like a predator was all of a sudden in that corner of the room. And then being a kid looking at it, be like, "What's going on?" you know. But that I experienced that a couple of times through my childhood. So no, yeah, I definitely believe in that with animals reacting and just being on some type of different frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when it comes down to the kind of what you were getting into, Rick, of you're inviting it, if you talk about it, if you say its name, that kind of stuff, everything kind of touches on each other, because it's a big thing in like demonology of you say the demon's name to like invite it to resurrect it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you talk about that subject and then you're more susceptible to that subject. one thing that like I definitely speculate about is I do feel like there is, the different frequencies that who knows, maybe these animals are on this whatever frequency, whether it's a kind of a psychological frequency, a spiritual frequency, or whatever. I think you can get in tune with that frequency, so that way
Mm-hmm.
you're more susceptible to it. So like, if in a way, it's like you got your wavelengths and everything of these frequencies, and then everyone's at that certain frequency, and let's say some sort of spooky ghost stuff is above us, and all of a sudden you become in tune with that. You just popped into that frequency amongst this flat wave. Everything in that frequency sees you and targets you and is like, they just want to poke at you. It's not necessarily malicious. Could be, but it's not necessarily. And so it's an interaction. It's you're now broadcasting. So stuff tunes into your broadcast, which is you.
Yeah, it's almost like the how like some people believe that we have, you know, all these different like um kind of worlds kind of like laying on top of each other, and it's like once you're able to, you know, go into that next realm, you take a little peek at it, and like you were saying that, you know, they're just as interested about us as when they come to our frequency, we're interested about them, you know.
Maybe in their
Um,
frequency, we're the spooky ghosts, we're the we're
Mm.
the
yeah,
we're the cryptids, we're the Bigfoot with our big hairy beards.
yep, yep.
I think even if you just go off what a lot of scientists have claimed, is that they already apparently can prove that we have many more dimensional tiers beyond the four dimensions that well, we can't really observe time in the strictest sense of it because it goes linearly, but they apparently have proven like, oh yeah, there's like all these dimensional tiers higher. So this idea of like, well, we don't even have any concept of what could dwell outside of our perceptible reality. um, and I think it's an interesting concept of, you were talking about like language, like words. Words have power. We can communicate abstract ideas that we can't physically see. It's interesting that we don't really know when a lot of spiritual or religious beliefs started, but it's likely that they spread because language was used to spread them. So perhaps like the way that we tapped into these abstract concepts that are higher than us is that we created language, and so then we could disseminate ideas that more and more people thought about and validated, and then it going by the tulpa logic, or the saying it brings it out. Perhaps the dissemination of ideas actually creates phenomena. And so if you believe something, you're mentally giving it energy, and then you talk about it to other people, and they get spooked, and it like creates more and more reality, so to speak.
Yeah, and then like that is kind of the whole essence of a poltergeist is you're creating your own reality, your own set of rules, your own entity, and there's speculation of like a poltergeist. Is it completely on its own? Like it is a culmination of emotions and different energies that are so strong that they take on their own persona and everything? Or is it that it's a culmination of all this energy that's just piling up and festering, and then it's in that frequency, and then so these other ghosties or whatever entities, who knows, show up and actually breathe life into it, give it a little bit of a soul per se.
Mm,
um there's that theory, which I feel like there's room for both things to be true. As
yeah.
far as poltergeist, which is just, it is the motion. It has no soul. It has no real life to it. It is just almost like a time loop in a way.
Well,
Um,
I liked how you described it at the start of the conversation, where it was like an imprint. It's like an echo of something. So it's not
mhm.
necessarily like a living thing. It's something. It's basically something that's containing energy, and it's like you were saying, it's looping the energy, like the emotion, and then once it like vibrates at a certain level, it'll something flies across the room or something shakes, like a bed shakes or something,
Mm-hmm.
or gravity gets weak because it's like burgeoning there and someone floats or something like that.
Yeah, and that gives a whole new meaning to like our own emotions and feelings. That there's more to it. That there is real maybe damage you can cause with your words and
Mm,
being volatile and just cruel to somebody. The kind of like energy daggers you can
mm-hmm.
be attributing to each other and everything. In order, if there it is possible to have something like a poltergeist manifest, then yes, I would say you can really affect another person with how you treat them and your words and everything just a whole nother different, not physical, but yet this other layer of someone's being that definitely can directly impact their physical being. I mean, we
Mm,
at this point, I think everyone's pretty accepting that you are capable of making yourself sick
mm-hmm.
just
Yeah,
by believing something,
yeah,
being overly negative about yourself, or just believing that you have a disability of some sort,
yeah,
believing that you have this illness, this sickness that maybe you grew up and your mom always told you you're prone to this disease, you're prone to this
yeah,
whatever blank thing, and you're paranoia and everything, and then you start showing symptoms simply because you were afraid of it and you believed it, and then all of a sudden it started happening. So it's like that is like almost like a inside poltergeist that you can cause, you know.
100%. I think that's I hesitate to like be so definite as to say that's fact. I would say like honestly, I think even just looking at our society, what the doomer, like you're depressed because you have no purpose, or if you live around here because the weather is so dark all the time, so you mentally just think about how oh man, it just feels like I need to be sleeping right now,
Hmm.
and so your body will function on a lower level. I would say that's almost definite.
Hmm.
And
And
psychologically, you can if you can turn your immune system to be weaker just by thinking about it.
hmm.
That's insane, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to specify around here, meaning Washington State, if we happen to have
Right.
anybody listening out of the state. um,
Yeah, it's almost like a placebo effect,
Hmm.
hmm.
It's like those things like, you're wanting something to happen so bad that, it just materializes out of nowhere.
It's just like
Or
the placebo entity. That's what a
Mm,
yeah,
poltergeist is.
yeah.
yeah. It's like just like, it can happen with anything, Like you guys were talking about emotions, it can happen with, you know, on your way to work, you're being so upset that you like have a thought of like crashing your car into something and
Mm,
lo and behold that happens,
Hmm.
and it's like one of those things like, oh, something took, over my body and caused the accident. I don't know how it happened.
mm,
Hmm.
Um, I know there's like a certain like ideology of what it's called. It's escaping my mind. Something of the void. But I think these are all different like ways that we try to explain the unexplained uh, things that happen to us. And going back, in the past, I believe that there's a lot of things that happened, and there was not a lot of newspapers, a lot of communication between tribes and cultures and villages, and they would try to explain all these things that they didn't know what was happening, and the only thing they could think of is possibly maybe it was the ghost of a loved one from the past, or maybe even like a ghost of an enemy if one of their like houses caught on fire. It's just like, how do we explain these things? Well, we can blame it on the spirits of our like our loved ones or our enemies in the past.
Hmm.
um
it's one of those things that really to me is I think anyone would find it unsettling is what like is a little bit off topic. It's not quite limited to poltergeist, but we're kind of building this space to explore like the unifying ideas of all these
mhm.
things. But the idea of having the disassociation, having the it used to be defined as like a split personality, but just the concept of where you form from something negative, you form something and it creates another being that also inhabits your body. So possession being like you psychically create something to get away from something or to disperse negative feelings either from outside or inside you and create something. And just that to me, it again, what I like to encourage is, because I don't like to assume that I'm smarter than reality, right? That I can perceive it perfectly, but it's this idea that sometimes there's this thing where people try to distinguish between the quote supernatural and the scientific or psychological. But I think I think in some ways they can be one and the same. It's not like this or that. It can be this and this. So if you create like a whole being, it's like the Wendigo. Like if someone consumes flesh, um, is it possible that they create this animalistic, they channel the animalistic sides, the baser sides of themselves, and this being is created where they feel they maybe they can't handle the fact they enjoyed the taste, and so they disperse it and create this thing where now they're that personality feels that it that's what it will do. It will do this action. So it's that to me I think is related to a lot of this.
Yeah, it's like a poltergeist is the ultimate form of a disassociation disorder. It's the Wendigo. You partook in one of the most egregious acts possible, and you can't handle the truth of what you did, or what you now are. And so then it's like, what am I? I'm
Yeah.
this crazy killing machine thing, and I'm possessed, and blah blah blah. And it's like, there could be truth to that, but ultimately that does sound like something that could be 100% a psychological thing. Of just ultimate, like, it just broke off a fragment of your psyche, and now you have this other persona, and there's energy around that persona that kind of gives you and fuels you in whatever this idea is, and takes on a life of its own.
I mean, Carl Jung even said that, like, the more, or I think Freud too, the more you repress something, the stronger it becomes.
Yeah.
If you don't acknowledge, if you try to like bury it deep down, it actually fuels it, because it is kind of hidden, so you can't deal with it like in the moment. So perhaps the poltergeist being the usually it's negative. Like there's been a few stories I've heard where you'll have a poltergeist where like a kid will get pushed on a swing or something, or but usually that's not as much poltergeist. Usually like benevolent guardian spirits or like loved ones or something. But it's the same kind of thing where might be positive, but usually it's not.
Yeah, I've read that, like, in like some cases that some poltergeists would only attack certain family members while bring like gifts to or things to like certain other family members. I think it was like the Tennessee Ghost. I think was the Bell Witch of Tennessee was one of them that I read that was like that. Where the witch or poltergeist didn't like the husband and wanted to kill the husband, but liked the kid and the wife. But to piggyback what you guys were saying beforehand about, disassociating, would that make maybe like a imaginary friend when you're a child? Would that be some kind of like poltergeist that you could create out of, extreme loneliness, or the willing to connect with someone if your parents aren't,
Yeah.
the best?
No, yeah, because like a big connection with dissociative disorder is trauma. A big connection with split personalities is trauma. A big connection with poltergeist, trauma. So yeah, like almost like one and the same with that.
Yeah. Because, there's some kids that take it to like an extreme of having their parents have to order their imaginary friend an extra meal, or get them another toy so they can play with each other, type of deal that I've read. And I didn't get too far into reading that subject to see if there was any cases where an imaginary friend became, a malicious like poltergeist.
Well, I feel like there's like 75 movies about that at least, but
Yeah, yeah.
That's movies though.
yeah, I don't know if there's any like real cases of that.
Well, I mean, it's impossible to get this data, I think, unless we lived
Hmm.
in 1984.
Yeah.
But to get this data, just the concept of uh, the more tumultuous living situations or the more isolated living situations, what's the rate of these sorts of things happening there as opposed to more balanced situations? And
Hmm.
I would guess that it's higher, but we can't really like get that data in an accurate way, I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, when it comes to this subject, it is extraordinarily difficult to get that data of anything because there is such a rational explanation to a lot of these things. There's, obviously the biggest thing, they're being liars, which is always outnumbering literally everything. But then every now and then you have the story that, is true, but you don't quite know because of everything else that's out there. And
Hmm.
so the only way to really know is through lived experience, to
Mm-hmm.
actually experience something yourself and be like, well, I know that all the things that somebody on the outside would explain this, but I know what I experienced and I know it wasn't
Right.
quite X explanation.
Hmm.
I think that's ultimately like as of right now, I think that that's the end point with a lot. I don't mean to enter relativism, right? Like I do think there are things that we can define as facts and also acknowledge that we don't have all of them. Like,
Hmm.
I think there's certain things that we can measure, um, and we can rely on those until we are proven wrong. But I also think, like, relatively, I think you're correct. Is that in a lot of these experiences, it's like you can. I mean, there are cases where you can believe someone, but it's down to does the person in the moment go, okay, I'm looking at this from every rational angle and I can't explain it. I know how someone would explain it, but I know that there's something off that doesn't quite make sense. Um, and only you can know because only you know that you're not lying.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So it's one of the tricky things where again it's like we've been talking about disassociation, which is effectively like you are good enough to lie to yourself. Um,
Yeah.
but at some point, like where's the line between I know my experience is true, and maybe I just don't have all the facts. It's such a fascinating thing, and I don't like to disparage anyone's experience unless it's very very obviously um, false.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but
Much like the whole South Park episode when Cartman's trying to convince everyone that he and Jimmy made the joke. It wasn't just Jimmy, and then
it
each
wasn't
time
just
he tells the story, everything increases, robots show up, he slays a dragon, all that stuff. That's the only time you can be like, well,
memory is unreliable. I'm sure there's things where 20 years from now we'll all recall things and perhaps they'll be played down, perhaps they'll be played up. You know,
Oh
hmm
yeah.
we
And plus,
can't.
like, go ahead.
No, no, no. That's it's just interesting. Like sometimes people outside observers will say like I feel like they were being a little rude to you, and I was like, oh, I didn't even like notice. I didn't care.
Exactly.
Or you'll play it up like, oh, they were definitely being rude to me, and it's like someone will say like I think it was just like a difference of connection. It's not
hmm
so.
or just the opposite, where someone's like, they were being rude to me, and it's like, I don't
Yeah.
think they were.
No,
Like,
no,
yeah,
I don't think so.
Yeah.
yeah,
I just think
exactly.
that, some of these stories that we're reading about, especially the ones back in the day, like some of the ones that were like the 1700s, 1800s, it's almost like a game of telephone
Hmm.
now,
Hmm.
where like maybe it was a simple gust of wind that knocked down, like, the things on the table, and it just further on just got, bigger and bigger and bigger until we get like some of these like famous stories where there was a ghost that was talking to, you know, um, my children and telling them different stories in different languages, or which I don't
Hmm.
know if it's a real one. I'm just exaggerating, but
Yeah.
uh,
It's
And like possession stories where people will speak in a language they don't know. You
yeah,
know.
yeah.
that was another thing that I was gonna start like brushing up on is that I feel like we have like a traditional like ghost idea where it's pretty like low activity, nothing really happening, they're just appearing. And we get the poltergeist, which they start becoming a little physical, a little bit of ghostly activities, and then we start moving into these possessions where it's almost like the poltergeist has you know taken over like a whole person, and it's like almost getting worse and worse and worse as you know they go on and they can start speaking in different languages that they've never heard, or speaking in dead languages, or um, their faces morph in, things like
Mhm.
that, which we've seen all over media and movies. But it's almost like what I was reading on like some of the cases is like back in the day we've taken ideas from poltergeist ideas and moved them into different things of like inviting not inviting them in, which is a typical of a vampire story,
Mhm.
Hmm.
or there's like another one where I read and it seemed like it was like the basis of like the Jinn story of like um the basis of these stories that they've become legends, and get stronger and bigger as they move on, and then we take that legend and make another idea off of it. I don't know where I was quite going with that, but you know
Oh, it's just
it's almost
interesting to
like,
think about, right?
yeah.
Hmm.
Like the fact. I mean, this is going like kind of big, broader scale, but just this idea of like what is more power. If we're going off my thesis earlier about language being the way if we communicate and conceptualize complex ideas through language, the even stronger version of hey, something like fell over and nothing was touching it, is what's the narrative? What's the story of the why? How do we explain, you know, why what is the meaning behind this activity, and then does the story then become the reality just because there is no other explanation? You know.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's that with what we'll often touch on with what we're doing here is it's the thing that happened and then the story that was told after. We as humans cannot help but to want to tell a good story, and sometimes reality is just kind of boring. So we just have to add those little story nodules that every good story has to make it more exciting, such as like with what you're talking about earlier. Um, the wind came in and knocked something down. And then that turned into the wind came in and knocked the salt down. And then on the ground, after I picked up the salt container, it said, die on the ground with the salt. And it was like,
Hmm.
oh no. So it's just that the evolution of each time you tell it, the want and need for to sound interesting and to have your friends' approval and stuff like that.
It's
And
almost like the stakes get higher and higher.
yeah, and so then, maybe it gets to a point where you keep exaggerating so much that all of a sudden stuff really does start happening. you
Yeah.
know, I think like the thing that's interesting is when it comes down to um, just paranormal things in general. Poltergeists are the ultimate form of the storytelling aspect of anything paranormal, because it's like there's many times where paranormal things that are have to do with like historical events
Mm.
that's a poltergeist usually. It's there's different things where people explored these situations where it was like a repeating event, a loop,
Mm.
some kind of ghost like time loop. So it's like there.
History repeats itself.
And there wasn't like an actual ghost repeating it. It was just like whatever happened, this whole energy, different spectrum, different frequency that we don't understand, it made such a dent in this thing that now it's like almost glitching and repeating, you know?
Mm.
Maybe that's another whole theory that you can get into as to why some people believe the whole simulation theory
Right.
of the Matrix.
There's weak points in the code, and if something weird happens, then it keeps glitching it, like an NPC that will get stuck in a wall or something.
Yep.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's your dead grandma NPC stuck in the wall, throwing plates on
She
the
was-
floor.
She was supposed to she was supposed to get recycled out or phase out of this build of the game, and then
Just didn't quite happen. Now she's stuck in the attic.
yeah.
Or that new one where that one girl on the plane was like, that person is not real.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
To me that was more that one was actually pretty interesting to me. Because it's possible there was like some kind of psychological aspect, but to me that was like tapping into the whole maybe not skinwalker, but the kind of the eldritch it's wearing the guise of a human kind of story. That footage was actually pretty harrowing.
I did see a little clip of that, but I never like delved into it. Is there maybe a little bit of delving you guys want to do for me right now for that story?
I didn't go
So-
into it too.
I believe so. I forgive me if this is inaccurate, but I believe so. Originally, the footage was just of her, and people were like, kind of either making fun of her or going like, "Oh, well, what did she see?" And then I think there was a reverse. There was one time where I saw a reverse angle, and then someone was like, "That's a different plane ride. They just put the audio over it." So there was a bit of like tomfoolery going on, where it was like, "Hey, see, there was nothing going on," and then someone was like, "Oh, well, that's not the same footage." So whether that was for clicks or they were trying to just like, be a skeptic, there was like some editing trickery there.
As far as
But the big thing was that people were pointing out is why would she embarrass herself? What would the motivation be for acting like that, but not just like, and pointing at a specific person, and just what is the and again, I don't want to get too personal. I've seen people do that for usually substances are involved. But the weird thing was that she just seemed sober, and she just seemed very unnerved enough to and I'm trying to remember if it was obviously after the plane had they weren't flying, so it was the plane wasn't moving, so it's
I'm going like based off of memory as far as what happened in that video. So I don't remember exactly like the beginning or necessarily the end like of what this scenario. Do you recall?
I just remember what I saw like on Instagram and different videos is just her standing up. Seemed like a guy or another person was holding her back, and you're just screaming, "You see that person over there? They're not real." Or that guy. I think that was that guy.
Yeah.
That guy over there, he's not real. He's
Yeah.
not real.
Because it kind of seemed like she was being escorted off the plane, right? So it was like,
Yeah.
what, and then why did the person start recording? What was she saying necessary before that recording? And like, was it just kind of the same tone the entire time? Was there something that set her off, or that's what I don't know.
Like my initial idea is like maybe she was drunk, or maybe some like just as I was saying, some substance was involved. And I've seen some people when things are involved.
if you
they
take a
get
muscle
extra
relaxer on a
emotional
plane,
fast.
that'll
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can
that's
see
fair.
some weird shit when you're in between half awake and half asleep.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
But yeah, so as far as with the subject of poltergeist, though, do you guys have any personal experience of any sort with this subject matter? because I actually do. Which I can get into, but I'll ask you guys that question first.
Um, I have like one personal experience, but it's a very short story. It's nothing too big. It happens almost every time I stay at my parents, you know, at my parents' house, and if I sleep in a certain room, I when I fall asleep, it feels like I have this dream, or I am in this room where I cannot move, and it's the room that I'm staying in. I cannot move, and there's a ghostly presence above me, and it feels like
Mm.
it's sucking my soul out of my body. And I can look up to it, and it's kind of skeletal, like the traditional look of a ghost, poltergeist. And I wake up, and there's nothing like above me at all. And
Hmm.
so I've always attributed it to night terrors because that's one of the things that that is like one of the what's the word I'm looking for, symptoms of a night terror is like uh you're you're like asleep but not asleep,
Hmm.
and so your body's like
Hmm.
projecting, you're like dreaming at the same time type of deal.
Yeah.
Hmm.
um but yeah, it's like almost every time I stay in a certain room at my parents' house it happens.
Hmm.
And
And so I
was
don't know if it's just because I'm uncomfortable there in their bed that they have in the guest room and I can't fall asleep all the way, and so my mind starts to wander. But it literally feels like I'm awake in the same room, but there's an entity above me that's like taking like this life essence out of me.
and this isn't the house that you grew up in.
It is.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that your
But
room?
that room used to be my sister's room,
Okay.
and
Mm.
so
Interesting.
now it's a guest room at my parents' house.
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay. Did
And
you
Because
ever?
if it was your own room, I was gonna say, well, maybe you experienced something traumatic in that room and it's like imprinted on you. But if it's your
no,
sister's room,
it's basically my sister's old room. Whenever I stayed there, it would happen. Um,
Did you ever
my room
experience anything
I never
in
had.
there before, like in your childhood, maybe, or anything at all?
No, not at all.
Hmm.
Um,
hmm.
like my mom said, like one day she saw like a person with a white shirt at the end of the hallway on, but it's one of those things that was just dismissed in our house. Um, but my house is like it's always also like my childhood house, I should say, is also like super creaky and not. I don't think it's like the best insulated, so
Hmm.
you can always hear like noises in the attic, but it's always just written off as just like wind noises or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my only like, if there's a paranormal thing, that's my only paranormal uh you know my only
Experience.
experience. Yeah. Um I still have like sleep terrors every once in a while here at the house that I own, but it's nothing more than just like um a little bit of like I feel like I'm like shaking and then I wake up.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
nothing as traumatic as, oh crap, there's a ghost sucking the soul out of my body. I gotta
That's
wake
very
up.
distinct.
Yep. Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
happened multiple times too, and it's the
Hmm.
same like almost ghostly face that I see all the time.
Yeah, that's pretty distinct right there. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I'm one of the biggest skeptics in the world when it comes to uh, poltergeist, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this is one where it's like I'm blaming it on night terrors because I'm the type of person where it's like I gotta see it to believe it, and
Mm-hmm.
but if I stick to my logic, I'm technically seeing it, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then
Exactly.
when I feel like I wake up, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, did the ghost just dissipate because it knew I was waking up, or knew
Or
when
is
I
it
was
that you can
coming
only
through?
see it because you're partially asleep?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Or did I, like how we've been saying, when I fall asleep, when I have these night terrors, am I tuning myself to a higher frequency and, you know, going into this new world? Who knows?
Bum bum bum. No,
What was
yeah.
your story, Brandon?
So, I won't go into details of the people involved, as to just not get into their privacy. But so I had, at this point in life, I had moved into this room, and even like before, like I didn't even have all my stuff into that room yet, and I was experiencing like just hearing weird noises and whatnot. And I actually like I got a spider bite on my back while I was sleeping one night, and I had no idea what it was until the next day. I was like, "Oh, that's a giant." Okay, and but with this particular thing, it was like I always felt like there was something in the closet in that room, like something looking at me, and just this weird feeling of like somebody over there wants to come talk to me. Like it wanted my attention specifically. Not necessarily that it had anything to say, just that it had my attention. It wanted my attention. And that was my distinct feeling, like as soon as I was like, laying wide awake at night, that kind of stuff. And it was just strange. But so then this like kind of like accumulated to turning and thinking I saw something, whatever. And as far as this, I think this particular thing happened first. I could have a little bit like mixed up as far as which thing happened first. I remember one morning, I had an early morning, and I got up and I was getting ready and everything, and I was then outside of the room, and so then just like the hallway right next to the room, I was just standing there, and I turned, and I swear I saw the person who initially had that room standing there. And I was just like, whoa. And like, as soon as like I went to like directly look at them, all of a sudden they were gone. And it was just like, it was just so weird. And like, I didn't really know what to make of it, but it was just like, I swear I saw like, an exact like outfit that they would wear and everything like that. And so that was just strange. But it was, such a like blink of an eye thing that it was like, can't really, put too much merit with it. But then I had this one morning where I'm asleep, and then I start waking up. Like those first moments of waking up where you're not quite coherent, you're not sure what's going on, and I'm feeling like somebody shaking my leg, and I thought that it was somebody trying to wake me up, and I'm just like very annoyed, stop trying to wake me up, I swear, like it felt like I didn't see anything, because I'm like half asleep, but I swear somebody was standing there shaking my leg. And then I was just like, very annoyed by it. And then all of a sudden, like shaking my leg, grabs my leg and like pulls and shoves me. And I just like shake awake, like flip over, and I'm like freaking out, like, dude, why are you doing this to me? Like, I'm thinking a person actually did it. And so like I go to turn to like say something of like, what do you want? And then it was like, there's nobody there. And it was like, it was just such a distinct, I know it wasn't my own, like me shifting myself. I know distinctly it was, I felt like a shove, like I've never felt something so distinct before in the terms of something like that.
Well, it's just restless leg syndrome, clearly.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
obviously.
It just went away after that.
Yeah, exactly. But so that is as far as like that was like the really height of it, and I was like, okay, something is actually going on here. And that's where I kind of figured this is the whole like the feeling that I was getting prior to this happening was attention. It just wanted me to interact with it. No matter what, it just wanted my attention. So I was like, okay, so that's exactly what I'm not going to do. And any other creepy feelings, any other little sounds or spooky, ooh, I didn't read into it. I just ignored it. And then lo and behold, it went away. Now, for several years after that, there's a particular just outside the room light switch that I know everyone in the household was experiencing that light being turned off and on for years, of just like in the middle of the night, you wake up in the middle of the night, use the bathroom and whatnot. It's like, why is that light on? It's 3 a.m. I know I turned that off before I went to bed. And just that constantly happening for like years. And eventually like it just kind of died out. But then at the same time, it was like, it was in correlation with the particular person. And
Can I ask if the light was it the similar design that I have, where it has one light on one and one light at the other, and so if you turn it either way, if it's the other side, it'll do the opposite?
not
Or is
that
it just the
particular
one
light.
side?
No, it was just it
Okay.
was a one light switch situation.
So
But it was
okay,
directly
so
it was directly like outside of that room.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then, so the person that used to live in that room, anytime there was something a little more emotional going on than usual, we would notice this light turning on in the middle of the night. Wake up in the middle of the night and that light's on. Don't know why. And it was just like, so it was like these increments and like of it not happening, and then something's going on with that person, and then it's happening and it's turning on and whatnot. So it's like this weird emotional, some kind of psychic connection. I don't know. Connection to an actual physical place. And, I saw what I saw and it looked like that person. I felt what I felt, and it was always that room and associated with that. So that's what makes me think that is kind of the definition of the poltergeist with what I experienced. It wasn't anything extreme or harmful, but it was something.
Wow.
It's wild.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't
Do
know.
any of us have anything else?
I think that's, as far as poltergeists and all my experiences in life, that's the only like actual poltergeist experience I've had.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I just have the one. Yeah, I was just thinking while Brandon was telling that story, I have like one other one that was kind of weird, but it only happened once. I remember when I was a child, it was a totally different house from where the initial story I just told was from, but I remember laying in my bed, getting ready for bed. My parents come and, tell me, good night and turn off my light. I remember turning over and I couldn't sleep, so I turned back around and I had this lamp that I would leave on in the room, and it would always cast like, like an image onto the wall, uh, with the shadows of everything. And one day there's this weird shadow where it looked like almost like a human head that had horns on it,
Mhm.
and it just stood there. And I remember looking at it, and the first thing I just did was like, whoop, flip around to the other side and put the blankets over my head and just hope that nothing happened. And then I just remember, like making some like weird noise so that my parents would come tell me to shut up. And my parents came and flipped the light on, and told me to quiet down and go to bed. And so I turned around to see when the lights turned back off if that image was there, and it was completely gone.
Mm. Yeah, that's the classic thing of like, you put the clothes on the chair and then it looks
Yeah.
creepy. Oh, that's an
Yeah,
interesting one.
I'll just like I always put it to that same idea where when my parents came in and probably told me to quiet down, they must have knocked something off that
Mm.
made it not have the same image as before, or the same shadow, I should say.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, it was. I think those are like the only two weird things I've ever had happen to me when it comes to possibly poltergeist or anything ghostly.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know we've hit our hour mark and we need to come to get to an end. But I suppose last remarks. One thing earlier that we were saying with the whole poltergeist, lots of things are always involving children and oftentimes young women and stuff like that. It is kind of interesting that the film The Poltergeist, or is it just called Poltergeist? I don't remember.
It's just, well, yeah, it's
Yeah.
Poltergeist.
So it is kind of funny that that does happen to revolve around the little girl like getting kidnapped into the other dimension. And you know, one thing that I was thinking before us talking is the whole that movie. You know, it's got poltergeist things. The whole like, you know, the mom is doing something, turns and then turns back, and then all of a sudden all the chairs are stacked up. You know, that's a very poltergeist, you know, type thing. And I was thinking like the movie is kind of just only in name poltergeist, with a little bit of the symptoms and not too much more because of that. But now that we were just talking about this whole frequency thing, that is where there's a whole nother dimension in that movie where the little girl gets kidnapped into there and is like in the TV talking to them and everything. So beforehand I was thinking like maybe that movie's not a very good definition of poltergeist, but now that we've talked about it a bit more, maybe it is an even better definition than I initially thought.
Obviously, it's like it would be an extreme.
Obviously, yeah.
There's certain things that, and I haven't seen the film in a while, but you know, it does certainly kind of fit that idea of the frequency. I mean, the TV itself is like
Frequency, yeah.
It's a specific frequency and the you know, the static on it. So I do think that maybe it's more accurate than at first blush, but it doesn't. It kind of, to be entertaining, it goes above and beyond.
Yeah,
with,
exactly. It's
like the skeletons and all that.
yeah, it goes so above and beyond. You just think that it's like, oh, that's literally all make believe, and it's like, oh, well, I guess maybe they did just a little bit more research than what we initially gave them credit for. You know.
Yeah, I think they're probably leaning towards the extreme to, you know, dramatize and entertain.
Yep, exactly. But any closing remarks, Josiah or Rick?
Just that I'm not sure what we should do next. I feel like every episode we definitely bring some interesting stuff to the table, but then it expands into these larger questions. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
Fair.
We can't experience every phenomena in our personal lives.
Yeah.
So maybe it's less maybe in the end it does feel more like a lab than a campfire, but you know.
I think they'll probably get less personal as they go on with
Oh yeah.
the different like phenomena that we're gonna be talking about.
Yeah.
It'll be something weird where you guys are like, no, I did go into a UFO. It's fine.
No, yeah. I did go into a UFO and meet Cleopatra and Beowulf. What are you talking about? And then they transformed into Optimus Prime and a werewolf, and we went to the moon. That's a personal experience.
That's that they brought you back.
That is my lived experience, and it's my truth. So I hope you guys can understand it.
So I think the best idea for the next one, since we've mentioned it over the last 2 episodes, would be Wendigo.
I think so.
It's true. We can delve into that.
If you guys can find it, I know I have a copy. If you can find a film called Ravenous with Guy Pearce,
That has literally been on my list for like at least 10 years. Like back when I was a teenager, I was like, that looks good. And I still haven't watched it.
I think I've owned it for 10 plus years and I haven't watched it.
Okay, well then I think, you know,
so
at least to have us all see a good film and to cover the Wendigo, I think we should all watch Ravenous. Even if we don't bring it up, I think it would be interesting.
Well, you just gave me the push, so I'll probably watch that like almost immediately. So,
Cool. Yeah.
all right. Sounds good. Until next time.
Have a good one, gentlemen.